suppose we should get started. All right, hi everyone. I think it's on. Yeah, it's on. I hear it. All right. I'm Derek, and I'm from Stoughton, and we've got some guys from Milwaukee. Do you guys want to? Sure. Yep.
Paul Karczewski, City Channel Manager.
Tom Loppnow. I'm just a lackey at the City Channel, but I'm here with him anyways.
So how many of you guys are already doing any sort of hybrid stuff? A couple. All right. So my presentation, I'm going to talk about 3 different systems first, and then they'll talk about what they've got going on. This is a very simplified version of what we do in Stoughton to make our hybrid stuff work. There's a lot more wires than what's on here, but what you've got is you've got all of our microphones feeding room speakers and our soundboard. But our soundboard also feeds back into the room speakers, but only the Zoom call feeds back in. So we have it separated on aux 1 and aux 2 on the soundboard to keep the sound separated. And then the soundboard also feeds an A10 Mini Pro, which is how we're integrating the people in the room with the people on the Zoom call, because that A10 Mini Pro has a USB-C out that you can use as a webcam input. So then when we're switching cameras, the TriCaster also feeds the A10 Mini Pro. Whatever shot we're on gets fed back into the Zoom call. So when it's not a webcam on the wall in a room, it's whatever shot we're on for TV goes back into the Zoom call. And then, of course, we have our 5 PTZ cameras in our council chambers that are all NDI. And then with this setup, there's a Zoom host on a laptop in the room that feeds the TVs. On another setup, I'll show you how we fed the TVs, but on this one, we didn't do that. And we have a computer in our control room that feeds into our TriCaster. So we have our computer, and they have their computer in the council chambers. But we make it all work together this way. When I was in Trempealeau County, our system was a little different. It looks a lot less complicated, but our microphones went to our soundboard, which went to our TriCaster, like most of you guys. We had our cameras and a Spark that went into the switch into the TriCaster, but we had a computer that fed our TriCaster, and then the TriCaster fed a cam link, which converts HDMI to USB to feed back in as a webcam input. So it's a lot cheaper. The cam link is like $30, where an A10 Mini Pro is like $400. So there's a big price difference there. But then from the TriCaster, we fed the TV presentation system. So what we did was on the TC1, there's 4 outputs, and you can change them. So on our TriCaster output 4, we've told it the computer input is what you put out on there, and only the computer input. So then we turned on the TVs in that room, and it got a feed of only the Zoom call. So this way we fed the TVs, and on this way, somebody in the room fed the TVs. One thing we've learned from both methods is if somebody's in the room on the Zoom call, they need to be muted and have their sound off. and that's one thing we tell everybody when I'm going to join the Zoom call. Yeah, but you're going to mute it, and you're going to turn your sound off, or else we're going to kick you out. And in Trempealeau County, we ran the Zoom meeting from the control room. So we were the host, and we controlled everything. In the Stoughton system, the mayor runs the Zoom call from the room, and we're just a participant. This version in Trempealeau County worked a lot better. You get to just kind of control everything that way. When they go into closed session, we just closed our door and walked out. We locked the meeting and closed the door and just stood out in the hallway until they were done. Closed sessions are tricky in hybrid situations because you can't leave the meeting even though you can't be at the meeting. And then I helped with the studio in Rice Lake. And this is more for people who are doing TV shows. This one's not a meeting setup. The studio cameras went to an A10 Mini. I think he now has an Extreme. But the studio cameras went to the A10 Mini. The studio microphones went to the A10 Mini. And James would control it from an iPad attached to his Mac. So he could control it while he was in the set. So he was actually a participant on screen while still controlling his studio from an iPad, which I probably can't do because that's way too much to concentrate on at once. And then he had it hooked up to his computer and monitors and would record. So his system was more like what an independent producer might use for like a talk show if they were integrating Zoom, like one Zoom participant and 2 studio participants. This would be a good setup for something like that. You can still use, a TriCaster and integrate your studio in the same way. We just haven't done that in either of the situations I've been in. So we'll switch over to their stuff because we want to have time where you guys can give us what you need. So we're showing you, but then we also want to know what you need us to tell you.
Question?
Yes.
So why use the MIDI Pro instead of using the cam link?
In the Stoughton situation, it's all running through a soundboard, so we needed input into it separate from the cam link. The cam link will only do an HDMI in.
Okay.
So yeah, that's why we did that.
How you guys doing? Paul Karczewski, City Channel Manager, Channel 25 in Milwaukee. This is Tom. He's one of our production specialists, and it was our job, probably with back when COVID started ruining everything. It was our job to put together a system probably within less than a month's time. So there's a lot of trial and error, how to figure out, how people are even going to talk to each other, or even what platform we're going to use, in terms of communicating. For City of Milwaukee, we use multiple different platforms. We use GoToMeeting is one of our main platforms. It's Big Brother, GoToWebinar when we do large-scale town hall meetings, when we do our, what's our late night meeting?
Well, Fire and Police Commission and others.
I can't think of it. Anyway, the larger scale meetings, we use GoToWebinar because there's a lot more functionality in it in terms of when the public comes in, they don't come in hot, their mics are muted, they have to actually register, they can't just, they have to be approved. We control all the mics, etc. GoToMeeting is different. We use those basically for our regular council meetings and general staff meetings. Are any of you familiar with either of those 2 pieces of software? A little bit?
And I'm going to interrupt you. The reason why we use the what's that?
GoToMeeting, I'm familiar with.
Okay. GoToWebinar is more of a controlled by the person. You have more control over it. And the reason why we use GoToMeeting platform is for our broadcast purposes, because we still are broadcasting over there. It allows us to give us the option to active cameras or who's speaking. So we have that ability to use it as a whole other camera function along with the cameras inside of our room. So that's why we utilize that, so that we can actually use it for our broadcast purposes, as opposed to a Zoom or the other formats where you're going to have the boxes and you can't have any control over that. This allows us to use it almost as another camera. So that's why we utilize GoToMeeting for that option.
Right. GoToWebinar is really, we don't usually broadcast that type of a committee meeting or presentation. Like Tom said, and I'll just kind of go through this here. All right, sweet. So these are the destinations where we send our signal. So it goes, when we do a meeting, it's exactly, these are all the places that it goes to. That one signal goes right to Spectrum Channel 25 cable. It is recorded and then eventually played back on our Latronics Ultra Nexus system. Our backup system to that is Aja KeyPro. It's a dual rack mount recorder. And that just backs up every single thing that we do in case the Latronics fails. Granicus handles our live stream 1 and 2. So we have 2 different Granicus encoders. Granicus is a company that archives all of our broadcasts, our meetings. They hold all the minutes, etc. We have 2 encoders. Our encoder 1 is everything that we do on channel 25. Number 2 encoder, we use that, we call that a live stream 2. So basically what we can do, we can broadcast something on channel 25, at the same time send a separate signal to a separate live stream on the channel 2 encoder. So we can run 2 things at the same time, except that live stream 2 is not broadcast. We also stream over to AT&T Uverse, although I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be with us. And then we have our ADA listening devices. We have to have that. The audio signals have to go to those. I'll show you there's a transmitter. People can check out a little body pack. They can wear a headphone in their ear. And so it's really important to have that audio, virtual audio and room audio going into that one earbud. And then beyond that, our closed captioning system has to also have as perfect audio as possible so it can caption everything that we do. So those are all the destinations. These are just kind of an overview of like what one of our committee rooms is. This is like our main committee room. So you can kind of see, these are like our TV cameras in the back. We have 4 cameras. This is what the committee sees when we are doing a meeting. There's a room monitor back there. It's like 70 inches, I think. So that's what they see. We have this 4K webcam. It captures a pretty good chunk of the room, and it looks like this. That's basically what the camera looks like. That's what everybody sees out in the virtual world. That is what converts our analog signal to digital so that everybody virtual can hear exactly what's going on. And it's just a simple thing. It's just an XLR plug-in. Output just turns into a USB. We feed the computer with that. Really simple. There's a volume control on it. There's even a headphone out on it if you wanted to do that, but we don't do anything like that. Mute switch, but it's just really the link from the main PA system to the computer. So there's that. This is a press box. So when we have these committee meetings, now that everything's like hybrid, we also have the press that comes into the room, and they want to be able to hear what's going on over the room audio, and then they also want to be able to hear what's happening through the virtual audio. So it took a little bit to try and figure out how to split that together, because there was a point before we had it all figured out where they would just old school just dangle a microphone over a TV speaker, and that's how they got their virtual audio. So there's that. And that is the ADA assisted listening transmitter. So basically what we do is take another signal from that press box, which has the room audio and the virtual audio, and it feeds that. That feeds the entire listening system. And on top of that, outside of the committee room is an antechamber where sometimes they gather off camera, they talk or whatever. They might grab a bite to eat or whatever they're doing. So in that room, they could only hear the committee room audio. So we had to figure out a way to split the virtual audio now into that room. And it's basically a lot of XLR cable run through, and it just feeds one speaker, so we can create a mix in that one room. Because they would complain, we can only hear the room, we can't hear what so-and-so is saying. So that was the solution to that. This is the wiring diagram. I know it kind of looks a little crazy. I thought it looked crazy after I drew it out, but it's fairly simple. The PA system obviously is the heart of the system. It feeds the PC, it feeds the press box, and it also feeds the overhead audio for the room. And it because it's feeding the press box, it feeds the listening device, the assisted listening. It feeds the PC. The PC feeds HDMI audio and video back and forth to this monitor, the big monitor that you saw in the room before. Out of the monitor is the virtual audio. We just took an output from the monitor and we split it. I think it goes 3 times now, because one split goes to the press box, one split goes into our control room mixer. The other output from the PA also goes into the control room mixer, where we have discrete audio on channels 1 and 2. One is for the room audio, and one is for the virtual audio. And we can control exactly how much we need to go to broadcast. The tricky thing is the audio. That was the biggest problem, because we're in a room. There's 15 microphones open all the time in a room. So to try and eliminate feedback, how are we doing this? It just took a little bit of trial and error because what they're listening to in there, they're actually hearing virtual audio out of the big monitor that's in there. So there took a little bit of trial and error, sweet spot, because the monitor could pick up on the microphone, and we just start, doing that. So we found a sweet spot in our Nexus software, Nexia software, audio software. We built different gate settings for those microphones so that they kind of close down a little bit harder than we used to have. They most of the time they were always open, but the gate closes down a little bit harder. That's kind of it. Like I said, the audio was the biggest challenge. That is our main committee room. We have 2 more committee rooms that do virtually the same thing. Also built a mobile satellite cart that we can wheel. It's its own little entity. Thing's got a computer. Basically what you saw there, it's got a set of wireless mics that we can place on a table for people that are gathering in a small room, and they just have that meeting amongst themselves. But we do use all the formats, Zoom, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. Our Fire and Police Commission does Teams, but we find that that GoToWebinar and Meeting are the best for us.
GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, do they have any restrictions on the number of attendants or how long they can be?
Only one person? I'm kidding. No. We'd like it to be that way. No. There are, I believe that in GoToWebinar you can have like up to 10,000 people that can join. GoToMeeting is over 1,000. But if everybody starts using their cameras, they start losing bandwidth, and then cameras start flickering, and the software kind of slows down a little bit. And so a lot of times if it's a big meeting, like some of our finance and personnel committee meetings get kind of large, where there's 60, maybe 65 people on a meeting. So, you would see an entire screen just full of little cameras. So it tends to slow things down, and we tell people, if you can, just turn your camera off, and
But that is the reason why we use it, though, is that it allows us to actually utilize that, and then also utilize. Let's say we know that you 2 guys are going to be speaking. Can you guys put your cameras on? We can go to active cameras, and then we've got a nice, good picture. We don't have the 10. For some of our licenses meetings, we have over 100 people in there, and 25 of them are callers 1 through 25, and you have no idea who they are. They have no idea who you are. You say, caller 25. Well, they don't know who they are, so it doesn't matter. So you're hitting a lot of mute. So it allows us to at least have control like that, and then say, we can drop people off and that kind of thing. So it's a good format, but it is a pricey. I don't know it's a pricier format, and now that they've got you where they want you the last 2 years, they're going to charge you more. But it's for a broadcast format, it's probably the best one to utilize, my thought.
So can I ask you a more specific question about that? I'm used to Zoom, I'm used to speaker view, gallery view, pinning people, focusing people. It sounds like GoToMeeting gives you some kind of back end where you simply press a button and that's the camera that's everybody else sees?
Correct.
Well, no,
Well-
yes and no. I guess I'm sorry to answer you have four actions. You have everyone, you have person speaking, active cameras, and then there's a fourth one that we never use, like maybe hide or something like that. But so if in fact there is a camera up, though, there's two cameras up, and there's noise coming from this one, but there's another camera up. It's going to show whatever the noise it's picking up on. So that's you can't necessarily direct in that regard. But even if you use active cameras and you only got 3 or 4 cameras on, it gives you a good enough screen to utilize that.
So active cameras, so if there's 10 people in the room, only 4 have their cameras on.
Yeah.
If you're in one mode, it shows everybody with a name if they don't have a camera and a picture if they do. If you're an active camera, it's just showing you the 4.
Correct.
Bingo.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But you can't, there's not an interface to switch between cameras, like this person's talking,
No.
I'm gonna hold him on even if there is a noise.
Right. No, we don't. There's nothing that we've ever known
No.
that you can pick and choose a person.
But if you know that if you have the knowledge that person's going to speak for a little bit, you can hit the person speaking or person talking,
You can force them to.
Just-
and that'll stay on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And it's even when you have, let's say you only have the 2 cameras on, you could manipulate it through your system with the keyframes or something like that. That it's still gonna picture. You can utilize that as a solo shot if you wanted to, but it just gives you that control.
Right. So we're basically using just our webcam that was mounted on the wall in that one picture. That's what everybody sees from our area. Yeah, although we're broadcasting, with 4 other cameras, each meeting for us takes 3 people to run a meeting. That's a director, camera guy, and then a master control guy. So the director does exactly what it sounds like. He's taking all the shots that we have from our cameras in the room. That's the only stuff that's going to broadcast. However, we do have the feeds from the computer also integrated, so that's also another source that goes to broadcast. But the camera guy doesn't just run the cameras. He doesn't just get the shots. There's a separate laptop in that room next to the camera guy. He's actually controlling the meeting. He's muting people, unmuting people. Before the meeting begins, he's checking people in, making sure that they're set up, etc. And that's where it gets a little tricky.
And I would say, you asked about GoToMeeting, and there's something I forgot to mention before. GoToMeeting has a strange quirk in it. When you first started up, and at least in our system, and maybe it's just us, I don't know, but when we first launch it in the morning and we get the thing going, you've got to create feedback inside of it. Because I think there's an internal gate that it needs to get to a certain level. So you'll create that noise and that feedback, then all of a sudden it'll finally close down and you won't have that echo. The other problem that you sometimes have with it is that with that wall mount camera, it will, for whatever reason, switch from that pile that Paul showed you to the camera mic. And as soon as that happens, everyone in virtual land is going, what the hell is going on? We got echo because it's pulling off the webcam now, which in turn is closer to the speakers, and then we're getting the loop. So those are a couple of the quirks with it, but typically they're fairly easy to overcome for the amount that you get from it. So
Yeah.
And with our system, where we're feeding all of the stuff into the Zoom call and out of the Zoom call, we get less of that feedback because it doesn't give other options. Because it's all coming in on one connection.
Right. Just trying to think if there was anything.
Is
else.
it your
Questions?
choice to run the meeting as opposed to having like a city manager? Like I feel like it's weird as a director producer to be telling who can and can't speak in a city council meeting. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like
Well, the
I
people.
don't want to have to say, hey, you can't speak. That's not my job.
and you're right, and I've actually had a lot of conversation with that. Because it is a fine line, but in reality, when you're dealing with this stuff, it's not about you can or cannot speak. But if you come in and your microphone is, or your camera, whatever you're using, is causing issues,
Then you
that
got to
defeats
say
the whole
something.
purpose. You got to
say
either, I mute them first and then say, sorry. Like, for example, Senator Lena Taylor was on a call like last week. She came in late, came in the wrong thing, but she blasted in. And I had to unfortunately pop on the laptop and say, Senator Taylor, you are now in the meeting. However, we're not on your item quite yet. I'm going to mute you, because the chair was actually, he was virtual as well. So it is a fine line, but at some point, if you don't take the direction of it, you're going to be, you're going to be stuck there. We're already there for hours at a time. Our standard meeting time is about 4 to 5 hours. So you let that go on any longer. I mean, I have no hair the way it is now. I'd have none left at that point. So it's just, and I talk to the chair. I talk to everybody involved. And I say, hey, if this happens, we've had conversations about it. You don't want to be that person, but at the same time, you also don't want to destroy 15, 20 people in the room that they can't hear anything because you got your microphone. So it is a fine line, but it's something that's got to get done.
And when I was in Trempealeau County, the chair would, under Robert's rules, the chair recognizes a speaker. So we didn't say, no, you can't speak. It was, if the chair recognizes you and you're muted, we'll unmute you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like just to continue to maintain order, so it's not 400 people all yelling into their webcams
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. See, and that's the beauty of something like GoToWebinar, when you have a giant ton, of constituents or the public, that wants to see this. They come in, they're muted immediately. So the person that's running the software has the power to mute and unmute. So that's a big feature of that. And there's something else I was going to say. It takes, for us, the way that we run a meeting, we run it with 3 different computers. So the main computer is what gets our signals to the virtual LAN and vice versa. The second computer is in our control room, which sits next to camera guy and between the director. That laptop is joined to the meeting as a guest. So he's able to run, handle all the mics and all that stuff. The third laptop is actually in the committee room itself. We use that strictly for presentation purposes. We don't want people plugging in USBs into the main computer and saying, I don't know, it's not coming up, and they hit the X, and then all of a sudden the meeting is gone, and that's the end of it. So we don't want that to happen. That's why we put another laptop out there. So 3 computers is what we use.
And some of the situations that I had, we only had 1 computer. So that it is scalable. I mean, depending on your staff. Like in Trempealeau County and in Stoughton, we only had 1 person running the meeting. So you can do it with 1 person. It just takes some concentration to keep track of everything. Yeah.
Can you speak to how you deal with presentations? So people in virtual land can see it, people in the meeting room can see it? Are you just using GoToMeetings presentation, that way by virtue of being on GoToMeeting gets up on the screen or are you doing something else?
Well, it all depends. If people can run their presentation from virtual LAN, we do that. And with the big monitor that Paul showed you earlier, that shows the people that are in the committee room. They can then see the presentation on there. We also have monitors that we are broadcasting our broadcast on as well, so it'll be on there. But that doesn't always happen. There's a lot of times where people just show up, hey, I got this flash drive, I got to do a presentation. That's where that laptop right there, that is solely in that room for presentation purposes only. That's it. So
if you're displaying the 4K camera out to virtual LAN, how do those people see the presentation?
Because it's also going into, it's logged in as a, I'm sorry, yeah, it's logged in as well. So we basically have the 3 of us logged in as 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
It's a lot easier for people to join the meeting and share their screen in this sort of environment. I think we're starting to go away from people bring their laptops and plug them in. We have people who will bring their laptops and say, I have a presentation, and I say, do you have the Zoom link? Join the Zoom. When the mayor says it's your time, then you share your screen.
Okay.
So that just makes everything easier.
Absolutely.
If they know how to share their presentation, that's the whole catch. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's when we discuss this with a lot of people, that's the, we have a lot of committees that are debating whether or not they're going to come back in or stay hybrid or whatever. And you have a lot of people saying, well, this is the wave of the future. That is true if this side knows what they're doing and this side knows what they're doing. If one of the sides doesn't know what they're doing, We're chasing in circles. And so, when everyone says, well, that's what all the big companies are doing, they also have a bunch of IT people and everything else that knows how to get this set up. They don't have Aunt Larry over there going, well, I don't know what's going on here. So that is where we're still trying to find the balance, even with some of the people that are on our committees, as well as our alder people. They're very smart people. But there's one person who puts his phone on, and it puts a phone to his, with the camera on, and puts it up to his ear, and you're looking at his earwax the entire meeting. So you're like, come on, Alderman. So I still think even 2 years into it, we're still actually trying to learn who knows what, and you're finding actually who actually was involved with these meetings, and not just had their stuff logged in, and they were doing things, and who was actually just logging in and taking off the rest of the day because they still don't know what they're doing 2 years later.
Derek talked briefly, I'm sorry.
So are your meetings longer because of virtual? Like, that's kind of what we experienced with our meetings were taking longer because with time to pass,
Right, yeah.
whatever, it would take less than a minute sometimes. to
Sure.
pass, but when they
Absolutely, yeah.
Virtually is longer.
They're too comfortable on their couch.
Yeah, yeah, they can drag on. I mean, Tom mentioned that some of our broadcasts last 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, but we've had broadcasts that have gone over 12 hours. And that gets to be a little too much.
And Boyce is making fun of us because his meetings are all like 9 to 75 hours long.
No, you're
Comment ended at 1:30
you're right, but and I think it's
the agenda.
Oh my God.
besides the complacency, it's also because there is some of that. If you're in front here, you could say, yes, you, and you can move the meeting along real quick. When you got 3 people, or some people can't get logged in, or they're logged in, we see it on the screen, but we can't hear you. Well, let's just hold and wait for this item, or go back to that item, and then they're still not there. And then,
Right.
so I also think that they sometimes forget how Robert's Rules works, and you shouldn't be discussing items that aren't on an agenda, or you should, or I don't care about your cat, and then, because they're there finally, we're hybrid, haven't seen you in forever, let's have a little teacup meeting.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on. So I think all those are part of it, but there's no question. They were long beforehand, but they've gotten longer.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, have any of your cities decided yet if they will keep the hybrid option?
It is inevitable that Milwaukee will be hybrid for the foreseeable future. People have just learned how much easier it is to come to a meeting, especially if they're traveling, like Madison maybe. They don't have to drive all the way into Milwaukee. They don't have to find parking, get there at a certain time, and then just be in the gallery to not even be called on. They just need to be present. So they're finding that that's the foreseeable future for us.
And at the city of Stoughton, they decided forever. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you have any workshops for elected officials and administrators on camera placement, makeup, lighting?
You're joking, right? No.
Really ugly
Yeah.
things.
Oh, it's
And
tough.
after you're reminded, you're on TV.
Yep.
Virtual audience.
Absolutely.
You can remind them all you want. You could put the sign up. You could hit them over the head with a ball-peen hammer. It doesn't matter.
Well, still sitting there in front of a bright
Halfway,
window,
or,
and
the camera's facing the side.
Yeah.
Look, underwear needs to be better than half the shots we get because they half the faces in it, or like I said, the ear. Or
we try.
Yeah.
We try.
Some of the best places our officials have spoken from are in their cars.
Right.
Mhm.
We've seen that.
Quiet, they have their phone mounted somewhere, and
Yep.
the lighting's.
Yeah, we had an alderwoman talking about street safety and all that stuff, and you could hear her blinker in the background. We're like, okay, shouldn't you be here instead?
That's the other thing. I think that as long as people can finally get, we have an alderman who I'm pretty sure is still on dial-up, because every time he gets into the meeting, he laughs off and he freezes up, and you can hear him swear, "What the hell's going on?" And the camera's still frozen. So that's the other thing, and I'm not sure what goes on with it. We've talked to him, but no matter what you do, you can't get a signal to his basement.
No.
It's the bunker.
From citizens like myself, maybe a couple of screenshots on Twitter will.
Yeah, right. They can see themselves. Derek talked briefly before about closed sessions and things like that, and for us, it's very similar. prior to us having a third computer, we would have a guy sit out there, and the guy would run the meeting from out there. So you would actually sit in on the closed session. Of course, you'd keep it to yourself, but GoToMeeting has a function called, it has a lock and an unlock feature. So basically before a closed session, the staff assistant will say, anybody who's not supposed to be in the meeting, please leave the meeting, and then we're able to lock the meeting with that feature. Nobody can get in.
And you
that's
can
how.
kick them out too.
Yep, yep.
And if you do decide, let's say someone is late, which they always are, it'll pop up and it'll say Lisa is in the queue or Joe is in the queue, and then you'll say to the chair, hey, should we let this guy in? Hold for a second, unlock, they come in, you lock it back up again, which seems to work very well. Although it is kind of scary when you're going through a real hard one, a real bad one time, and you look down, you see that it unlocked itself for a second, you go, oh, okay, I better lock that quick. But you just got to keep an eye on it because it really is it's a nice function to have. No one gets in, and it always pops up who's coming in. So,
I wanted to say real quick too, the feature or the reason why we have the camera guy running the extra laptop and joining the meeting that way is because we're using the signal from that computer. That's what we use to broadcast. So we don't want to see all the controls popping up on the screen, muting, arrow flying around and all that stuff. Because he's joined as a guest, he can do all that work on a separate laptop. And we keep that as clean as possible for broadcast.
you say, I think Paul's, don't join, that person doesn't join as a guest, they actually join as an organizer as well. It's just a third organizer, so you're not a guest. Because if you are a guest, which I've done before and learned the hard way, you can't mute people.
Right. You don't have
you
any
can't change
control.
anything. You're like, oh boy.
Right.
So you've got to join as an organizer, same link as these.
When we build the actual meetings themselves, because we create the invites and all that stuff, we can assign people to become organizers, presenters, or in GoToWebinar, they're panelists and or attendees. So as long as you're like an organizer, you can have control over that meeting.
So with GoToMeeting, and again, I'm more used to the Zoom world where you have Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars. But GoToMeeting, you can still segregate people within the meeting function. I know you have that more control with webinar, but you have that same control with the meeting where you can.
And what do you mean, like segregate? What do you mean, like
Presenter, organizer, different levels.
Allow people to talk or kick them out. Well, I guess,
Yeah. Yes.
You can mute
webinar,
them.
You can kick them. You can move them to where they can view only.
No, GoToMeeting is you're in the room, you're in the room.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds very similar.
You can create a presenter by going on there and saying, I want to make you the presenter, myself.
Right.
And you can mute them, but you can't put them to that level where you can only say, I'm just going to watch. You're only allowed in view only room.
What criteria do you use to choose whether you're doing webinar or meeting? Because our cities, we do everything in webinar, because if the public comes in, we want them over here. They can't do anything until they raise their hand.
So you use GoToWebinar or Zoom webinar?
Using Zoom webinar.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
But, so what criteria do you use to do meeting when somebody can just pop in the middle and start talking?
It's really based upon like public comment and how much of the public is actually going to be a part of the meeting. How they can just join the meeting and come on.
For example, I'm sorry I cut you off, but for example, our license meeting, it's inevitable you're going to fall way behind. And so when we first went to virtual land, we tried to do that where we'd only put certain, we give 10 minutes per person. And then, but we found that, holy cow, we're falling, this or whatever. So now it's kind of a free for all, and you got to have the ability to let them in and speak, even if they do call as a caller, you don't know who they are. If for some reason legally they missed their earlier appointment, they at least have that opportunity to call back in and say, hey, I'm sorry, I tried to be here, or I was here and got cut off, whatever the excuse is. They still have that option, and then the committee still can go back and take the item up again. But legally, you have to give them that option. Otherwise, if you don't, and they miss their time frame, so that's why you got to kind of leave that window wide open. And that's
Okay, yeah, and I said that. Find the criteria.
Right. And we do use Zoom webinar on the occasion that we have a bilingual meeting, because it has a bilingual function in there that you actually have to add on or pay for it, but you have a translator and that function, you just literally click a button, the original audio dips down 50%, and the translated audio comes up full. So we use Zoom Webinar for that.
Feature Zoom has
Zoom.
for meeting.
Yep, they don't have that.
I didn't realize it had
Yeah.
that feature. I'm glad you mentioned
Yep,
that.
yep. It's really cool, and a lot of the times it's becoming a lot more prevalent now with some of our multilingual alders and whatnot.
That's a paid feature.
It is, yep. Anybody else? Good. You guys good? Cool. All right, cool.
Well, thanks. I
Good-
hope you learned
yeah,
something.
Good talking with you. All right. And good to see everybody in person and not on there.
Yes.
All right.